welcome to this bonus session of the New Digital Church course. We're going to talk all about how to apply the strategies from the New Digital Church course to children's ministry. In other words, how can we create a digital children's ministry strategy? So the goal is to think through the components you can use to create a digital strategy for your children's ministry. The goal is not to do everything that I'm going to talk about in this session. The goal is to think through which components you can make as a part of your digital strategy for children's ministry. And at the very end, I'll give you what I think is my prioritized list, and you can make your own prioritized list and get those one at a time. So you won't use everything, I don't think. You might. There's some churches that might use everything, but many of you will not use everything that I'm going to talk about. You will have to prioritize, and you want to be patient and take it one step at a time, because it would be easy to get overwhelmed. Much of what we are talking about in this course and even in this session is not new in the business world, but it is newer in the church world. You know, it's not something that a lot of churches were doing. So we want to be patient, take it one step at a time, and that'll be a good approach. So one thing that we talk about in the New Digital Church course that I'm going to refresh here is the engagement pathway. So let's see if we can show this here. This is something, it's just a sample of what an engagement pathway could look like for a church. If you only look at the top half of it, many churches create some type of assimilation path, engagement pathway, next steps path, whatever you want to call it. And it's just a representation, a map, so to speak, of the steps that somebody could take when they go from not attending your church to hearing about it, to attending, to getting connected, to really getting involved in some way, and to being really invested in your church. Now, these are the labels that I came up with. You might have this in your church and use other labels. I don't think the labels are important. What's important is that you have a clear, defined path. Todd Atkins is well known for saying that churches use a menu approach far too often, that you think of going to a restaurant that has a huge menu and you can get whatever you want. A lot of churches, that is the strategy. And that is not a great strategy, because people don't know what their next step is. They can actually get overwhelmed by the multitude of choices, and it's hard to serve that new person well when a lot of the options on the menu are speaking to people who've been a part of our church for years. They've been following Jesus for a long time. So an engagement pathway is a really helpful tool. And what we want to think about as it relates to being a digital church is, what does it look like online? So up top, in person, you can see the levels. There's awareness. People are aware of your church. Maybe a friend or family told them about it. They heard about it. They saw something online. If we look down at the online section, maybe they saw something on social media, or a friend emailed them to invite them to watch a service. And then they move towards attention, where they give our church attention. They attend a service, in person or online. They go to some event, in person or online. Attention could be they just stalk the church's social media, right? Because they were aware, but now they're actually giving some form of attention to it. And then there's connection. They've taken the step from, I'm not just giving it attention, but I'm actually going to take a step to connect. So for most people, this is where they go from kind of unknown and anonymous to known. Not really known, but somebody knows who they are. They meet somebody. They fill out a card in person. They fill out a digital connect card, and somebody follows up with them, and so they get to know them. And then they get involved, and they join a group, or they serve on a team. And what you'll notice is, back with awareness and attention and even a little bit of connection, the options up top in person are a little different than the options online at the bottom. But the farther you go along the engagement pathway, the options are very similar. It just means, is this in person or is it online? Is that small group in person or is it on Zoom? Do I serve in person at the church during the service, or do I serve on the online team as a host during the service? So you can see that there's less difference in the options. The mode has just changed. And then obviously that last level there is invested. These are the people we think of, your core volunteers who are in a group. They probably lead as volunteers. They may not even just volunteer, but even volunteers who just serve and don't lead anybody, they're super committed to the church and to following Jesus. And the engagement pathway just plots those steps. Now, when it comes to children's ministry, one thing we can think about is, how do we create a children's ministry version of that same chart, but not a competing one? So in my mind, the way I think about it is, If you could build out your church's engagement pathway, then you want to build out your children's ministry one as a supplement to that. And kids end up, because the way children's ministry works, they move along that path faster than adults because they have to. Because most churches that have in-person children's ministry, a kid shows up, they maybe weren't even aware of your church, but their parents take them. Now they're aware, they're attending, right? And they get connected to some leader in a classroom. Maybe it's a small group, maybe it's more of a classroom setting. Whatever that setting looks like, they've already quickly moved from aware to connected. And if they just attend a few times, they're really moving to involved, because now they're in a group or in some kind of class where, a leader knows them. Some of the kids start to get to know them. So they can progress along that pathway very quickly. So when it comes to building out an engagement pathway for children's ministry, we don't have to overthink that. A lot of that's going to happen quickly. What I want us to think about is the kids and their parents. So think church-wide with their parents, with your church-wide engagement pathway, and maybe you'll make one as a result of watching this session if you don't have one. I would not build an entirely separate, engagement pathway for parents of kids that almost competes with the church-wide engagement pathway. I would try to make it as a supplement to that path for parents. But you do want to plot this out, because we don't want to just present that menu like we talked about, and now people are confused and what options should I take, and I'm not really sure what to do here. We want to present a map. Here's your clear next step. Make it easy, make it obvious, make it strategic. And we want that for children's ministry just like we do for the entire church. So now as we talk about applying digital strategies to children's ministry, I'm going to go through some reach strategies, how to reach new people digitally in children's ministry, and then how to connect and how to grow. And so one of the first things with reach is your church website. You want to feature your children's ministry on the website. Use real pictures if you can. That might mean photo release and getting permission from people and all that. You can use stock photos. Plenty of churches do that. But we all crave authenticity. We all love what's real. Now, there's a reason that people that have businesses that have millions of dollars and they run commercials on TV or ads on social media, that a lot of times those same ones that do the best are when somebody holds their phone up walking down the street, or they're in their kitchen and they go live, and those videos sometimes on social media will go viral and be far more popular than the one they spent $1 million on, because there's something too authentic. So if you can use real pictures, use real pictures. On the website, you want to communicate to unchurched parents. You want to communicate to your church parents as well, but they know most of what you have to say, right? Because they've been there. So think about your children's ministry page on your website as being designed for people who haven't attended yet. So answer the questions parents would ask, and you might even need to ask some other parents to see what they would ask. Build trust with them. Talk about your safety protocols and things like that, because we want to build trust with them so they're willing to take that next step. And then provide some kind of a plan your visit or pre-check-in option on there. That way they can take a small step there digitally before they have to take that bigger step to attend in person. So that's the website, and you might figure out, we're going to put our children's ministry page here on the site. It's going to be featured. A lot of churches actually don't feature it. I'm biased, so I think it should be featured. And that's because a lot of churches are trying to reach parents with kids. And so if that is your church, why not, make it prominent, your kids ministry page and your student ministry page. Now so that's our website. Those are some things we can do there. Let's talk social media. A key decision is, are we going to have a separate or shared accounts with the church? So will you have one Instagram channel for the whole church and kids ministry is just a part of it? Will kids ministry have its own separate channel? Does student ministry get its own separate channel? Is that true in Facebook? Right? And so you have to decide this. I don't know if there's a right or wrong. I mean, there's benefits to both. If you have one, you get more traffic there. That's a benefit. A downside is people would be distracted, though. Not distracted, but they would be less engaged, because if I'm a young adult without kids and you're posting kids content, let's say a quarter of the time, well, then I'm ignoring a quarter of your posts. And that social media platform knows that and won't be as inclined to show it to other people. So there's pluses and minuses there. We do separate channels. I like that. It's probably what I'd pick if it was my choice. It may not be your choice, but that is a key decision to make. And with that, I would focus on Facebook groups, Instagram, and YouTube. So let's talk about Facebook groups. When it comes to kids ministry, I think about Facebook group for parents. I think you want a Facebook group for parents because just like in person, we want to connect parents. I think that's a great part of a strategy to serve parents. We also want to do that digitally. And right now, Facebook groups are a great way to do that. There are other options for sure, but create a Facebook group for your parents. You have to decide if you want to do it by age group. Like, is there one for preschool and elementary and middle school, high school? Is it all one? Again, I don't know that it's right or wrong. There is a critical mass element. If you don't think you could get enough parents in separate ones by age group, or just acknowledge that, in my family, we'd be in at least 2 of those with our 3 kids. And at some point, I guess we'd always be in 2 by age, but you never know. We could be in 3 different groups. And is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I tend to think 1 is better. And for most churches that are going to be under 1,000 in size, you probably don't have the critical mass to make 3 or 4 different parent Facebook groups run well. My experience with Facebook groups is you need a certain critical mass and engagement for it to kind of have a life of its own, which is what you want. You want to post, you want to spark conversation, but you'd love for that to be organic too, where people are sharing and posting as well. So a strategy you could use in the Facebook group, and this is true for all social media, is 25% of your posts are about information. Like, hey, that event is this Thursday. Hey, this is the new series we're starting this Sunday in kids ministry. Those are great, but the problem is most churches make that 90% of what we post, and it's like we're shouting from a megaphone. And if you had a friend who talked about themselves 90% of the time, you probably wouldn't be your friend because you'd think this is crazy. But that's what we're like as churches. We post 90% of the time just shouting and announcing what we want people to do, talking about our church. So can you scale that down to 25% and then make the other 75% about celebrating, about encouragement, about sharing? I think that will boost engagement on whatever social media platform you're on, but certainly in your Facebook group. And then create a template schedule. Create a template schedule of here's what we're going to post and when. And again, less can be more. Less posts that are going to be more engaging are better than more posts. So if you had one post that you worked on for an hour, but you knew it was going to be engaging, or at least you thought it did. You never know with social media. That would be better than 5 posts that you're going to spread out over the next 5 days. So less is more is the approach you want there. Let's talk Instagram. Instagram obviously been growing tremendously in popularity. Most churches that are thinking about their children's ministry acknowledge that those parents are probably somewhere between 25 and 45. And again, there's always exceptions to that. But if you think about that age group, and certainly if you think about moms, where are they on social media? Well, they are on Facebook, many of them, because so many people are on Facebook. I think like 2 billion monthly active users. But not far behind that is Instagram. And so you could create a children's ministry profile. Again, only if your church is okay having separate profiles. We just did this in my children's ministry at the time that we're recording this. And so we did exactly what I'm sharing with you. We started out with probably 30 pictures. We went back for the last year, curated 30 pictures that we liked, posted them kind of in chronological order from what they were a part of. And then you can also create story highlights. And you may not be as familiar with Instagram. Maybe you don't use it, or maybe you do, but you've never created a story, or you don't even watch the story posts. Those are gaining traction too in popularity. But what's great about them is you can have a bunch of story posts and save them as what's called a highlight. So if I come to your Instagram channel for the first time as a new parent who's never been to your church, there could be a highlight there of orientation to what it's like for kids ministry in your church. And that could be a thing that I could just click through. Again, it's a bunch of story posts, so it's a fast thing. You're not going to communicate 7 pages of information, but it could be a quick orientation. You could also have something that casts a little vision for this is how you want to serve parents. And so if I'm a new parent, I go and I get to see that. Or maybe it's a highlight of some kind of event or something like that you think shows your church well. Like, this is what we're all about as a church and as a children's ministry. And you can make those into highlights that almost then become like ads for new families. So you want to communicate about the new channel. This is something we just did because we launched this. So you want to get those pictures in there. If you are ready, I would get the highlights ready in advance. And then now that you have kind of the channel ready, you can communicate it. And then you post, maybe it's 2-3 times a week, probably not more than once a day. Again, that hurts usually the analytics. Stories you can post more often, so certainly use that. Definitely use it when there's like a series of things that you want to show or a step you want people to take, but you want to give them a number of reasons why. Stories work really well for that. And if possible, get a volunteer to own this. We recruited a volunteer who we gave her a couple hundred pictures. She curated them, got them ready, posted them, created the story post that turned into highlights, and she's going to run that channel for our children's ministry going forward, which is great because we all know that there's so many things to do, this may not get time. So that's how you can leverage Instagram. I do think, again, it's not something everybody has to do, but when you're talking about reaching young families with kids, a lot of them are on Instagram. Now let's talk YouTube. So Google's the biggest search engine in the world. YouTube is the second biggest. Google, of course, owns both, so it's nice to be Google financially. Why do we want to leverage YouTube with children's ministry? Well, one is the ease of use. If you're putting kids' content online, YouTube is a great, easy way for parents to consume that content. Again, this is real experience my church had. We started out with our online kids content on our church website embedded with Vimeo, and that was fine. It was nice that everything was there in one place. But watching that with my kids in our house on a TV was not easy. I would cast it, but then the audio video wouldn't sync as well, or it would kind of glitch out. And then I'd have to plug it in, so I had to mess with that each Sunday when we would watch this together. When we started a YouTube channel for our kids ministry, and put that content there, made everything easier because I opened the app on the smart TV or Roku device, go to YouTube, I'm already subscribed to our channel, and we can watch it right there. For kids, there's a benefit because it feels like a show. And we're not trying to make it a show. It's not like kids ministry is a show, but the younger a kid is, the more that can feel familiar if they're already used to watching anything on TV. It's also more likely to attract other viewers. YouTube, one of the benefits of YouTube is, again, so many people are on there every day, every hour, every minute, that your content could eventually get seen by other families around your church. Now, it's not as, YouTube is not really a demographic or geographically based solution. So it's not saying, hey, they live in the same city, let me show this to them. So, there's some of that. This isn't a huge benefit, but there is something to especially I think even with church, like your messages in your church and your service, not just kids ministry, the fact that people can stumble onto this and find it, which really isn't true on Vimeo or some player just on your website. It also can be binged. A few weeks ago, our youngest two, our daughters, were watching the preschool content from our church for that week, and they watched that that week's content, and then it got to the very end. We use Orange Curriculum, and Orange Curriculum features Ollie the owl in the content. And our youngest daughter, Paige, who's not quite 2 years old yet, when that video ended, she said, more Ollie, more Ollie. And it was awesome that we could just take the remote, go over to the next video from the last week, and hit play. And she finished that one, and we went to the next video from 2 weeks ago, and we hit play again. And how much do we love as parents that our kids are learning about the Bible and binging that content, right? Because they got enough of other things that's fine and good, and obviously all of that is helpful, but it's not like this, right? This is different, and YouTube makes that easy. So how do you do it? If your curriculum creates a video, use that. You could make your own video if you don't have a curriculum that creates a video. Either way, you could consider a combination of both, like it's some video you shoot added on to what your curriculum provides. Create your YouTube channel. Again, you have to decide, is it separate from the church? Is it your own? We went the separate route. We started out with one and quickly decided, you know what, we're going to go different channels here, so it's very targeted, and I think that's a good thing. Upload, content to the channel. Recruit 100 subscribers, because that's how you can get that custom URL. Honestly, I don't think that's a huge deal in the end. It's not like a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, it's youtube.com/. But there is some legitimacy to that, and be able to put that on print media or on your website or when you email it out to parents, there's something to that. if you have a separate kids channel and a main channel, like my church does, you can feature each of the other channels. So like when I go to our church YouTube page, I could go on the side there and there's our kids channel featured. Same thing for the kids, vice versa. If I go there, our main channel is featured. You could also embed it on your website. We still do this because we provide the content, the activities and some of the things like that that parents can do with their kids. We include that both in the description on the YouTube video, but then we do embed it on our church website, on our kids online page, and parents can get that either way. A lot of parents are going to access this through an app on their TV like I do, and so I'm actually going to access the other stuff through the website, and that's fine as well. But you can embed that on your website. I would just make sure it's the same video because you want as many eyes on that same video as you can. So the same one that's on your YouTube channel, embed that in your church website. Now let's talk paid advertising. Spoiler alert, this is going to be at the bottom of my prioritized list. I actually think it is a huge opportunity for churches, but it is the most complicated of all the things that we're going to talk about in this session. So for that reason, I would probably save it near the end for many churches, unless your church already has experience with this. Plus, I think we want to kind of build out the other pieces so that when we are starting to use paid advertising like Facebook ads, we're pushing them to something that is built the way we want it to be built, if that makes sense. But I'm going to talk about it here because it is one of the best ways to reach new people, especially affordably. What churches used to spend on mailers and billboards, and I mean that still happens, is you don't get nearly the return on your investment as you do with paid advertising online. So you could get started with Facebook ads. I would say create a custom audience of the parents who are already in your church. And the way you do that is you upload that list of their names and emails and maybe a couple other pieces of data to Facebook, and you create a custom audience. And now you have this group almost on Facebook that is the parents in your church. Then you can create a lookalike audience off of that. What that means is Facebook will say, okay, here's this group of 100 parents that you uploaded. Let's say 70 of them are active on Facebook. It will look at those 70 people and say, okay, who were some other people in this area, because you can specify the mile radius or something like that, who seem like those parents that you uploaded, and you can then run ads to them. Now, when it comes to church, one thing I don't like about that strategy is Facebook might find other Christian parents who are already going to some other church. That would not be my goal. I feel like we're all one team, and so I'm not trying to compete against another church online with ads. So you'd have to try that out and see. We've run that a couple different ways, and so far I would say the experience is it's hard to tell, who we're reaching. Is it parents who are not a part of any church? Do they go to another church? But you could do that. You could create that lookalike audience, and you could also create that custom audience if you wanted of people who visit your kids ministry page. So again, these are just deep, kind of more advanced versions or things that you can do in Facebook advertising, but you can essentially create these custom audiences and say, hey, advertise to these people. And one of them is people that visit your church website and even a specific page on your website. So if 30 people visit the kids ministry page on your church website that month, you can run a specific ad to them. Now, we all know how this works because we have looked at something on Amazon or Target.com or something like that, and then we go to Facebook and wow, it's so surprising. Here's that same product again, and they're trying to get me to buy it. That is called retargeting. Like you came and looked at it here, and then they retargeted you with an ad here. We can do something similar in our church where we could target the visitors to the page, and you could even exclude the parents who are already a part of your church. That way you're not spending advertising dollars on people who are already there. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we can do with that in the content section here in a little bit. But social media, paid advertising is a huge opportunity, but it's more complex than most of the things that we're going to talk about. Now, when we are trying to reach people, parents and kids with our children's ministry, even for the kids and parents who are already a part of our church, communication is huge, right? It's so important. Communication is the foundation of a lot of relationships. So how we communicate with parents and with families really, really matters. So one thing you could do out of the gate, and this really doesn't even have to do with online, is do a communication audit. and you kind of look and see, what do we send to parents in a month? Maybe you print it and lay it out, and you look at it on the floor, and you figure out, where does it seem overwhelming? Where does it seem inconsistent? Where is it like need some help grammatically, or with proofing? And you could do an audit and just figure out, are we communicating too much, too little, too often? And that would give you an idea of what you need to change. And from there, you could create a parent communication plan. And you want to think church-wide. So again, if your church sends a church-wide email every Thursday, don't send an email to parents every Thursday, right? Spread that out. And depending on how your church works, it might be everybody does what they want. Like in the Bible, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And so people just communicate whenever they want, whatever they want. If that's the case, you don't have a ton of control over that. That's okay. That's understandable. But you could figure out, okay, when are things getting communicated? I'm going to pick a day every week or every other week or whatever when it's not as flooded. So, but the key is to work with your church-wide plan and think about online as well as in person. And here's one of the biggest opportunities when it comes to communication. Think about the new family that attends your church and a follow-up communication plan that you could put in place with them. Maybe you already have this, you just need to adapt it to online. That would be fine. But if you don't have it, create a communication follow-up plan and think about, what are you communicating after their first visit? What are you communicating after their second visit? What about after they take that key next step? Maybe it's a new family orientation, maybe it's your new here class, your church-wide class. You don't have to think through the communication, I don't know, for the first year, but what could you communicate after first visit, second visit, and help them take that next step with the goal of getting them connected. And again, work with your church-wide plan. With Ministry Boost, we created a resource called the New Family Retention Plan. You can get that. You can use the code there, New Digital, to get that for $25 instead of the $99 that it normally is. So I would encourage you to check that out. If you already have a plan developed, then you probably don't need it because you're just going to modify that existing plan to work with kids ministry, and that's fine. But if you don't have a plan, I would highly recommend it because you can have 80% of the plan developed for you right there, and then you just modify it for your church. Then you come to children's ministry and say, okay, how can we supplement that? So when we talk about getting families from reaching them with all those things that we just talked about to now connecting them, we're going to talk about online engagement. And that's one of the biggest challenges that churches are facing because churches are moving content online, but what's happening is the engagement isn't there. So the options are there, but people aren't taking part in those options. So we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can kind of boost online engagement. And I'm going to start with video content. I already mentioned leverage YouTube. Our church moved our kids' content from our website to YouTube, like I mentioned, and we doubled our views. We did something else at the same time, which I'll mention here below. We had kids and volunteers get involved in the videos too. I think that also helped because there was familiarity. There was excitement for kids to be in the videos and things like that. But I do think moving to YouTube was a big part of doubling that engagement. You could film your own intro, outro, with volunteers, with staff, with kids. You could have games and competitions that you add on to the front of it. We've done that. Again, huge boost for engagement because it's fun, it's different, it's unique. And so you could add that onto your videos. You could have parents record kids doing the memory verse or something like that as another bonus piece. My niece did this for our church. I tried to talk my daughter into it, our older daughter, and she wasn't having any of it. She thought she'd mess it up, so she wasn't going to do it. She was a little stage fright. But my niece did that. And again, this is just all going to help boost engagement online. We've also had kids like volunteers, older kids, 4th, 5th grade that help lead worship when we're in person, film that, leading a worship song on Zoom even with different boxes. They're in different boxes and putting that online as well. And all of that for us has boosted engagement. Now, this idea is not actually about online at all. It's really an offline supplement to online, and that's boxes. Putting your ministry in a box to equip and resource parents and kids to engage with the content that you're already putting online. So if you check out ministryboxed.com, We have a place that you can get custom design boxes that we partnered with Ministry Boost. There's also a bundle that you can get, and it has designs and ideas of what you can put in there, and even some templates of things that you can put in there. We're currently doing this. Again, this was another huge boost for engagement for us because now parents were equipped at home and kids were encouraged to participate every week with the content. You could fill it with curriculum and activity cards, supplies for those activities, challenge cards for kids where like they complete the challenge card by doing these 3 things each week. Maybe offer a prize at the end of the month or something like that. You could give something away that's just fun. We've done that so far in the 2 months that we've done it. And of course, there's gonna be some parent instructions in there. I would recommend if you do this, you don't mail them because that costs a lot. $6, $8 a box is too much money to mail it. Where I know in our church and many churches I know of, we have parents picking them up, and we also offer delivery using volunteers, and that has worked really well. Now, it could be that because of financial reasons, because you're meeting in person with kids ministry and just a small portion isn't there meeting in person, or maybe because you want to supplement what you're doing in person with online, you could do a digital only version so that it's mostly free because you're not buying all the supplies and resources in the box, but you're still equipping parents at home. And here's what I love about this. If you think back to pre-COVID-19, churches were already struggling with in-person attendance. The average church would say that somebody in their church probably attends once every 3, maybe once every 4 weeks, right? Which is very different from when I grew up and we attended 3 times a week. But I know in our church that the average kid did not attend half the time. So what that means is even before COVID-19, there were as many or more people not there each week who were at home but could engage online as there were in person. So you could create a digital box strategy that wouldn't cost you as much and keep your content online on YouTube or whatever. And the idea would be if Charlie and his parents don't come that week, they could go online and watch the content and they can engage using the digital box and the resources. And then next week they show up in person. But guess what? They watched last week online, so it's not like Charlie missed week 1 of the series, when he's there for week 2. And then maybe he comes again in person next week, but he misses week 4 for a soccer game. But again, he can watch it online and use the content from your digital box. And of course, it doesn't even have to be a digital box. Maybe it's just those resources that are available online. But what I love about this idea is that I think the future of the church is like the future, it's like the now of real world, where we seamlessly work in and out of digital and in person. We order something on Amazon digitally and we physically go pick it up at our door. We order food from a restaurant and then we go pick it up there, or maybe somebody delivers it, or maybe we reserve a table in advance but then we show up in person. And all of that is just very normal to most people. It's just how they've lived their life now. There was somebody in our church who is part of an online virtual group that I'm leading, and she mentioned that they looked our church up on Yelp before attending. And I thought, sure, that makes sense. I don't know, church people probably don't do that. They probably just search for churches. But if you've not been a part of a church before, like she hadn't, searching on Yelp makes sense. So how can we in children's ministry and church-wide create strategies where online and in-person work together seamlessly? And I think digital boxes could be part of that. So another idea is to start a parent accountability group. What I mean is for parents who are in that invested level in your church, like they're not new, they're not exploring faith on their own, they're not, a year in, they've been following Jesus for some time. They want their kids to follow Jesus. They want to be the best parents they can be, but they're probably overwhelmed. They probably feel like they're failing. You could start in a group that is in some ways accountability, which sounds like nobody wants that. You know what I mean? But if you want to be a really good parent, you would welcome the idea of being in another group with other parents where you would talk about, maybe for 30 minutes, you'll do a Zoom call every week. How did your week go? What's your plan, in your family to help lead your kids in faith at home? And how did this week go with that plan? But if it's high accountability, which I think it should be, because again, this is invested parents, it should also be high grace. Meaning, if you didn't do anything this week to help you lead your kids in faith, which everybody has those weeks or even those months, and many people those years, still show up to the call because there's grace. That we're somehow, even though this goes against what most of us think in our mind, that we're going to call parents to a certain level of responsibility and expectation, but at the same time we're going to match it with the same level of grace because it's hard and we're not going to do it right every week. And so you could do a group for parents. Maybe you keep in touch throughout the week via GroupMe or Marco Polo or something like that. And then when you do the check-in, you encourage people, celebrate wins, share ideas, and you can challenge people a little bit. Like, what is your plan? How are you doing with that? There's a post on my blog that you can get to from that link right there, nickblevins.com/26ideas. And some of the things that I've talked about already are in that post, but there's some other ideas as well to boost online engagement. So that was a ton right there in that session. And I kind of warned that it'd be like drinking from a fire hydrant, and there's a chance you probably feel like overwhelmed and like, wait a minute. If you have watched the other sessions in the new digital church course, a lot of it is not new. But if you haven't, certainly this can feel like, wow, that's a ton of stuff. So here is my prioritized checklist. It's not going to work for every church. Depends on what your context is, what your job is, what size your church is, what else is on your plate right now. Like, there's so many factors. But generally speaking, if I would say, like, here's the priority that I would put all of those things in that I just mentioned, this would be it. I would start with the engagement pathway, church-wide and for children's ministry. But children's ministry would just be a supplement to that church-wide one. And even then, it's primarily focused on the parents. In children's ministry, how can we help parents take next steps in the engagement pathway? I would update your website. This might mean a whole website overhaul, which that's probably outside your scope, and that's okay. But even if you don't have that authority, can you push for your children's ministry page getting updated and designed for that parent who has not come yet? And I would do that. And then I would create that follow-up plan for those new families. So if new families check out the website, which most of them will, even if they get invited by another friend or something like that, what's your follow-up plan for when they go to the website? Maybe they do a plan your visit or a pre-check their kids in. Maybe they don't, but they come in person. What are you doing for first-time families to follow up with them and help them take next steps? That would be next on my list. And I would leverage YouTube. I just think there's so much power in that. Churches have been, in my opinion, pretty late to the game there. And I understand there's a lot of pushback. I know a lot of churches who simply won't do it for safety reasons, theological reasons, all of that. But if your church is okay with it, I would leverage YouTube for your children's ministry. There's just so many benefits there by putting your children's ministry content on YouTube every week. Whether kids are coming every week or coming, once a month, there's a benefit to having that content on YouTube, just like they can see in person. And it won't be the exact same thing, and that's okay, but leverage YouTube. I would create a Facebook group for parents, and that way you can create community online in a way that's accessible 24/7. I think, in fact, in my church and in a lot of churches, I think one of the things that we probably don't do well enough is connect parents to one another. And that is so beneficial, because as a parent, you realize, oh, I'm not the only one whose kid does that. Or I felt like I was failing, but you are too. So this makes me feel better. I mean, there's just so much power in connecting parents together. And so why not create a Facebook group? And Facebook loves groups. The engagement there is a lot better. So you could create a Facebook group for parents. You could start a box strategy, whether that's digital or physical. Then I would create that Instagram profile. You might reorder those. I might reorder those depending on what's going on in my church, what I felt online engagement was like. But right around that same level and priority, I would say, is creating an Instagram profile and using it. And then starting that parent accountability group. And as I list these, by the way, think about a volunteer that could manage the YouTube channel. Could a volunteer be the primary, or two volunteers be the primary moderators of the Facebook group? Like, who's good as a parent on Facebook already? Like, you see them post. And, they're not like posting toxic things or, complaining about politics or something like that. That would be hard. No, they're on there and they just love to interact and they share and they ask questions and they comment on other people's stuff. do you have that parent already? And could you ask them to be, the moderator of your Facebook group? Same thing with Instagram. I mentioned a volunteer in our church leads that for us. Again, think through volunteers with these things because staff cannot possibly do all of these things. And at the very end, I have launch Facebook ads. And that's because, like I mentioned before, it is the most complex of all of the options that I mentioned. And I will try to help however I can for you to learn how to do Facebook ads. One of the challenges with Facebook ads for sure is that they change, what the ads manager looks like. And there's easy, I shouldn't say easy, but kind of beginner level use of Facebook ads. And then there's advanced where you can do all kinds of crazy retargeting and things like that. But that's why I put that at the bottom of the list. If your church already leverages Facebook ads in some way, then you could do that easier. You could just talk to whoever is doing that and just figure out how to add children's ministry campaigns and things like that to your existing strategy. If that is not happening in your church, that's why I would have it there at the bottom of the list. But I do think eventually every church that wants to reach and connect people online should consider paid advertising. And I say it under the banner of paid advertising because I don't know if 5 years from now, Facebook will be the best platform for that. You can make a case right now that if you only advertised on Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, of course, that would actually be better than on Facebook. Now, you still have to use Facebook's ad manager to do that, but you could make that case right now. And you would certainly have made the case that a decade ago, advertising on Google was better than Facebook. So it changes, and that could easily change again in 5 years. But just the idea of paid advertising, I think churches should leverage that more because there's so much opportunity there and the cost is so low. So that is my prioritized list, how I would approach it as you apply a digital strategy for your kids' ministry. Again, the goal was to think through the components, not do everything. And I don't even know that you have to come out of this and create this full comprehensive strategy that's ready to go in a month. I think the goal is think through the components, prioritize them, and start implementing one at a time. And if you do that, I think you'll have a better chance at reaching and connecting people online.